Thank you, Pam. I appreciate it. So we put together a little presentation here that kind of from the what we have compiled some information about the state of Forest Hill School District. I'm going to flip through some of these slides here. So Election Day obviously is November 2nd, and the 4-year term, Bob Bibb, Sara, Jonas, Katie Stewart, and the 2-year term I'm running for, Linda Hausfeld. So a little bit about me. I am a 16-year resident of Anderson Township. I have 2 kids that have gone through the school district, and my son graduated in 2018. My daughter is a junior at Turpin High School. On a professional level, I work at a manufacturing company, and I am a compliance analyst in ethics, and I maintain policies and procedures, and also train people on those policies and procedures. Basically, I am, and I have been stating this all along, I'm against CRT in the schools. I want to maintain our long standard traditional excellent education, and I am also committed to financial stewardship to the community.
I'm Bob Bibb. I've been a resident for a little over 13 years now. I have 2 daughters still in the district. One's at 5th grader at Air, and one's an 8th grader at Nagel, and then one of my daughters just graduated from Anderson last year. I work as an assistant manager for a local finance company. My day-to-day job is to help the staff maintain their job, answer their questions, maintain or hold them accountable so that they're maintaining their goals, things of that nature, and help with the customers. That's basically it for me.
Hi everybody, my name is Sara Jonas, and I am running for a 4-year term on the Forest Hill School Board. I am an auditor for the Ohio Department of Taxation, so I would want everybody to know that I would be mindful of our money. And what that means is any expenditure approved by the board, I would make sure it's going to its clear and concise purposes with a no-hinted agenda. I am a product of Forest Hills. I know we have amazing schools, talented teachers, and gifted students. I just think we need to get back to the basics. From there, we'll continue more with the presentation. Sorry, I'm getting a little feedback from that. We wanted to start as just a reminder of what the actual duties of the school board are. And basically, in a nutshell, we would adopt annual budgets, recommend financing funding options, hiring a superintendent and a treasurer, engaging community in decision-making, and policy review. If you've taken a look at your property tax bill, you can see that 55% of your property taxes go to Forest Hill School District. And there has been a lot of discussions based on the state funding model that a 2 to 3 year levy would be required to sustain our expenses. So it's just important for everybody to know 55% of your bill goes to the Forest Hill School. The next slide is, what is Forest Hill's care team? It's important to start with what the actual 4 cornerstones are: culture of learning, culture of innovation, and culture of collaboration. And the one that we're focusing on is the culture of relationship and wellness. Wellness is the Hope Squad, more for mental health, and we are all for mental health for our students. The relationship portion is the care program. Now, on our website at 4forforesthills.com, there is a 45-minute snippet of the actual presentation that was given for the care program. I would advise everybody to go and check that out. And part of watching that video, we have done plenty of records requests, and we feel that program is seated in CRT. That is definitely something that we would want to eliminate. The program, it's like taking us back 50 years, dividing everybody based on their race or their gender or anything like that, and that should have no business in our schools. The next slide. So originally on the Forest Hills website, under the Inclusive and Equity tab, was the actual care program. That has since been taken down, so we did get a snapshot of that before it was taken down, and just to walk you through a little bit of that, they're advising that all teachers practice the continuum of diversity, belonging, inclusion, and equity, and the mission is to have awareness of one's own cultural identity and views about diversity. The CARE program contains all CRT buzzwords, and the CARE program is training staff to practice the principles of CRT. Next slide, please. The CARE advisory began in the fall of 2017, and during the 2018-2019 school year, staff from all buildings engaged in professional development training led by the Hamilton County Education Service Center consultant, and during the 2019-2020 school year, the focus was educating staff on the CARE mission and engaging in conversations about diversity and inclusion with students. Staff began their work around understanding their own implicit bias, microaggression, and privilege. That's highlighted there in blue. Also highlighted in blue, inclusion and equity, getting to an equitable environment, and if you go under the second resources and click there, it takes you to teaching tolerance, which is part of the learningforjustice.org. And the website notes that it is anti-racist work in schools. Our current staff is amazing, and we were just wondering what data is there to show that we actually need programs like this here in Forest Hills.
Okay, so what is CRT? There's a lot of questions and a lot of conversations about that out there today. CRT, the definition, claims that American society is fundamentally racist and that it's organized to help the white race oppress people of color. CRT traits are white privilege, whiteness, white supremacy, and conscious bias. I think we've heard those words at past board meetings, so I just wonder what the connection is here. So this is a records request document regarding, so the relationship part of equals the care in the cornerstone right there in the middle under the with the red circle. CARE, all staff will demonstrate cultural competency to ensure success for all students. What exactly is cultural competency? I don't know. What's the definition? I'm not sure. Is it training, programming to bring attention to students of color or minorities, or who are allegedly at a disadvantage to white students? Is it training and programming to understanding and interact effectively? That's a good question. Here's another piece of information that we have found, an example of equity. The PTA/PTO president met with Scott in March of 2021 and discussed language changes in PTO to be more inclusive and wanted to change donuts with dads to donuts with dudes. Scott Preble spoke to this in April board meeting and said, we are responding to the children in our classroom by avoiding, and said it is the avoidance of terms. Next slide is, here's a little bit of just more language changes that have popped up. This is a Facebook post from a Nagle PTA president. At 3:38, I guess the post was deleted and replaced with a picture on the right. Was this person notified to not let the community know that they were changing language, or what's the explanation? Here's another example of the CARE program document at the bottom with the red box that says brainstorming, introducing and implementing an equity audit in your building. I'm not sure what that means. And then the next slide here is another example of what was being taught during teacher development during that time. The red circle you probably can't see, or maybe you can see it, but the author of this particular example states that there are 3 key areas of education: multicultural education, social justice education, and culturally responsive pedagogy. She also states that a key point to remember, only CRT is focused on the cognitive development of underserved students, while multicultural and social justice education each have a supporting role in a culturally, and I have to scroll down, responsive teaching. Just wondering why our Forest Hills school teachers are being required to read this, and what is the ultimate outcome if this is being taught to them. So this is actually a video that we have sourced from Records Request. I'm gonna need to pop out of this and go into the YouTube here. Diversity, belonging, inclusion, and equity is a framework that Scott Prebbles uses a lot over the past year. And behind this graphic piece, give me just a second, technical difficulty. So back up here. So this is the diversity, belonging, inclusion, and equity piece that, again, Scott used references a lot during board meetings. Behind this is a video that was given by the Hamilton County ESC consultant during the CARE training. And I just want to play a portion of this. Just give me 2 minutes here to let you hear as she describes parts of inclusion and equity.
Long it takes to work toward equity. This is so important because people often think that it's going to be a one-time thing that we do. It can be a one-year dive that we spend. It really is an ongoing journey. And this continuum allows you to see just how long it does take for things to shift to be more equitable and more inclusive. So we're looking at about 5 to 6 years, and at this point, you've really been asked to help plan the budget. So not only have you been invited and you feel welcome and comfortable, but you've actually
Yeah, that's pretty much the end of that part of it, but this is just a clip of that video that we sourced. Just wondering what privilege is she talking about, and what systems is she really disrupting and dismantling? So at the end of that video there, if you can't really see it at the bottom, but that is actually sourced from a website called Disruptive Equity Education Project. So that's a whole different website in itself, and if you probably could Google search it and you could go check it out. This video is also on our website, 444esthills.com. If you want to go back and watch the whole thing, you're more welcome to. One more mention, that is a 9-year framework piece so at the bottom of all of those columns, she showed the first one was 2 years, the next one was 2 to 3, and then 9 years. So that's a full 9-year framework.
So on the next couple slides are going to be what the care team was bringing into individual schools. The first few of them are elementary schools. So some of the things that we're bringing into elementary schools that we're going to teach our children to discuss, talk about, whatever you want to call it. These are 5 to 11-year-olds that talk about microaggressions, talking about how can we raise awareness to their privilege. This is what was brought into Wilson. So we got 5 to 11-year-olds going to talk about their privilege. At Sherwood, we're bringing in an equity audit. Nobody knows exactly what an equity audit is. It's never been explained. And again, we're talking about, on the next slide, sorry, on Maddox, we're talking about the care team again, about intermittent planned staff meeting activities mandatory for all. And then there's a question on there. It says, is it a voluntary group with a question mark? So that makes it sound like you're maybe required to join these groups or these teams, whatever you want to call them, regardless of whether you believe in it or not. At Mercer, they're talking about microaggressions versus manners. And then one of the things they talk about is a new vocabulary. What exactly are we changing? Vocabulary is vocabulary. What are we changing? There's no explanation of what they want to change. At Nagel, we're talking about microaggressions. And these are children that we're supposed to be learning about microaggressions from. Or that are about their microaggressions, excuse me. Turpin, they had a diversity day. There's nothing wrong with diversity. Not a thing wrong with it. But some of the things that they're bringing in are coming from the New York Times, which also brings us the 1618 project. Sorry. Or 1619 project, excuse me. Sorry, I was off by a year. And again, at Turpin, there's a question that's asked about the staff. How would you divide the staff into groups? Would it be by privilege level? So what privilege does one staff member have over the other staff member? This is what our district is doing right now. And then in this year, there was three board meetings before anybody noticed this. It was in July, it was noticed. Right above the main office, there was a fish. It's an unassuming fish, but it has the Black Lives Matter name on it. We're bringing politics into our children's schools. We don't need to bring politics into the schools. It was removed once we were complaining. Somebody complained about it. And then there's a mural that was painted in Nagel. And each of these different hearts, and I asked my oldest daughter what they represent, and she said they're different sexual identities. And she says you're segregating everybody based on their sexual identity. And segregation is wrong. People fought against it 50 plus years ago.
What age group was that?
This is Nagel, so this is 11 to 13, 14-year-olds. Yes, very impressionable years. So then the DBIE slide that Linda showed you earlier, this was hanging, even though Scott says and the district says that this isn't in our schools, this was a slide, this is a picture of that slide hanging in one of the walls in Turpin, in one of the classrooms. If you go to who makes this slide, it's a group called Disruptive Equity Education Project, or DEEP. And they talk about, when you go to the About Me part of them, it simply states, changing mindsets around equity and dismantling systemic oppression and racism. This is what, apparently we're all racist in our schools and we don't even know it. This is a survey for students, and now we're asking, sex assigned to birth, male, female, now we're putting in intersex in there because I don't know why, it doesn't make any sense. And then so, we want to bring back transparency. These presentations that are not the presentations, the questionnaires that are sent out to students are now being sent out to the parents for us to review them before, and tell the district you don't want your children to take these surveys. Some of them are very in-depth, some of them are harmless. But some of them are asking questions that perhaps you don't want your child answering. So one of the things that we're going to do is restore transparency back into the district, restore academic excellence so that everybody has an equal shot across the board. We're not going to lower standards for everybody. We want to maintain academic excellence. Restore fiscal responsibility, and most importantly, restore trust back into the district. And one of the rumors that we want to dispel is that the most senior board member is automatically the president for the next year. That is wrong. The board votes on the president within the first 15 days of the year. And then some of the top topic words, the buzzwords, is the SEL, is social emotional learning. The United States is falling in education compared to other nations around the world, or other developed nations. We need to focus more on education, less on the emotions.
I have a question.
At this
Well,
point, we're just
yeah.
having a presentation. Thank you.
What?
Are you finished? All right. So we have a set of questions that we gleaned from the September 29th presentation. So the first of those questions to the panel is, what is your position on mandating masks for students in Forest Hills School District, as opposed to allowing that to be the choice of parents?
Thank you. Yeah, I think we do need to recognize that last year, really, the district and teachers did a fantastic job with standing up a virtual option for students. And want to recognize and thank all the parents and the families of the district, because they also made major adjustments and sacrifices in their homes and their schedules to allow that to happen. We were all challenged to step out of our comfort zones during that time. So having said that, the number one priority of the district is to keep children in school in safe and learning environments. That's number one. Getting back to school this year was critical of getting kids back into the classroom. I support optional masks for all students, and the reason is I want to give back the right to the parents to choose for their child to put the mask on or not.
And I'm going to simply agree with what Linda said. If you want your child, like if your child's playing sports, you don't want them to miss the big game. If they're in a play, you don't want them to miss the play, put a mask on them. It's that simple. That's the way to avoid that. If you don't want your child to wear a mask, then that's your right.
I mean, to piggyback on all of that again, yes, I would love to see all kids in the classroom. CDC recommendations are different than a mandate. I would put that choice back with the parents to choose what's best for their child.
Okay, thank you. Second question, how will you balance your role as, if elected, as an individual policymaker with your related role on the board to work together with other people with whom you might disagree in order to hopefully form a consensus for positive policies for the district?
Sorry. I guess I can start with that one. Board members obviously have the obligation to express their own opinions, but respect each other at the same time. Board members have the right to disagree with decisions, but they need to support a board majority if that's the will of the school board. As a board member, I would engage with those with different views and know that meaningful engagement requires slowing down and listening to others. Healthy debate is good. Making policy can sometimes be ugly, but it's important to remember that as a school board member, you're elected to serve the public.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, working for a global manufacturing company as a compliance analyst in policy-making capacity has given me the opportunity to work with different cultures from all around the world. So I'm very familiar with working with different backgrounds and cultures and know and respect those people that I work with. Bringing those skills would guide me as a board member, and I know that I could do a great job.
We can get along and agree to disagree on things, but the end result is for the students, to benefit the students. So you don't have to rubber stamp everything. Everybody doesn't have to agree down the line. There's nothing wrong with disagreeing as long as you're doing it respectfully.
Next, why did you three choose to take the Republican endorsement as opposed to running without the Republican endorsement?
I'll go first since I have the microphone. So for me, I don't always agree with my party's leadership. I agree with the values and the platform. But to run, and some of you may know this, to run a campaign, it costs money and you need help. Doing it alone is a monumental task. It's hard enough with help. That was the deciding factor for me. I didn't want to do this alone. I wanted help. I wanted people that I knew who could support me out there.
I would piggyback on the same thing that I chose the Republican endorsement because my values align with the party. Obviously, like what Bob said, with the endorsement comes help. There would be no way for just us to reach all of the precincts and knock on all the doors if we didn't have the help from the party. And as a Republican, I believe in individual freedom. I believe in limited government. I believe in peace through strength, the rule of law. I believe in fiscal responsibility, and I believe in personal accountability.
Yeah, I echo both of their sentiments. Basically, it does take a lot of work and it does take a lot of effort. And when I decided to, when I got the endorsement, I was very thankful for that because I got a lot of help behind the scenes. Although all four of us are really boots on the ground, doing a really aggressive campaign. So we're out there talking to the people in the community and getting to know everybody and understanding where the community and the citizens feel how the district is working for them.
Thank you. Next, do you have a position on the use of technology in the classroom as a learning tool, including whether children experience what is referred to as too much screen time in the learning environment?
Yeah, screen time. Screen time is really becoming an epidemic, I think. Children can spend, I think, an average about 7 hours a day watching And using screens, you know, they can have damaging effects depending on what they're watching and what pops up on their phones or even on their screens. You know, even security is a concern. Now that the Chromebooks, the kids have to use the Chromebooks now, that's adding more screen time onto them. I would like to actually see a little bit more hands-on learning for the elementary school kids. I think that eye-hand coordination and just, you know, even flipping pages of books, I think it's really important for them to have that. The older kids, maybe not, but, you know, definitely for the elementary kids.
I'm going to agree with Lyndon on most of that. The elementary needs to get the fundamentals and the basics down before we start introducing all the technology. Technology changes so fast. But as you progress through the years, there should be an adequate amount of technology that the world uses out there. I mean, the world is changing. But to use it solely as a tool, and when we talk about, at least when we were talking about screen time, I'm referring to a teacher just playing a video and the students learn about watching a video. That's not teaching. Anybody can watch a video. So that's what I don't want to see is just a bunch of kids sitting around watching videos and that's all they're doing and that's how they're learning.
I would obviously agree with everybody, but I noticed through online learning with my kids last year that, again, there was a lot of apps that they use just to teach, but most importantly is them not knowing how to even type. So if we're gonna push Chromebooks and everything on the younger ones, because again, I have younger children, I would like to see just, do you know how to use the computer? Do you know how to type? And they definitely had free range of the internet, which I did not like, but that's okay. I would like to see obviously less apps being used in K through 6. Teachers love to teach. I think we need to let them teach. Obviously, we need to come up with some different tools for learning because everyone learns, you know, in different ways. I guess I would add to that. Doctors urge parents of young kids to limit their screen time and sometimes avoid it altogether. Heavy screen time is linked to slower development of speech and language, fine and gross motor skills, and social and behavioral skills. And time spent in front of the screen is less time kids playing or coloring or writing and learning from their friends. So that's what I would think about that.
Thank you. Would you speak to, you've already addressed the equity piece that you've identified from some slides, but would you speak to your views on the distinction between the term equity and equality as these terms are being used, it seems to determine some curricula within the Forest Hill School District?
Okay, so to differentiate those two words, equality means that every individual has equal opportunity and treatment regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, and sex. Equity refers to and strives for equal outcomes. It is not the protection of the individual rights, but it's the apportionment of privilege, power, and wealth. Equity is based on group identity, oppressors versus oppressed, whatever category you want to call it, and equity is a radical change to the norm. So some of the keys for equity, I think we talked about it in some of the video: whiteness, white privilege, white fragility, oppressor, oppressed, intersectionality, systemic racism. I think all of those were kind of referenced in some of that material that we had in the PowerPoint. And then also equity in Forest Hills is built into the DBIE framework piece as a part of the CARE program, which is brought in with the guidance of the Hamilton County ESC in partnership with them. You know, we heard her say we need to disrupt and dismantle the system to change structures of power and privilege. So what are those powers and privileges that they're talking about?
And Linda pretty much says what most of us up here, I think all of us are thinking. But when we talk about the equality, so we're in a public school, we all have the same opportunity to succeed. Some of us may need a little bit more help than others, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if we start lowering standards in the name of equity so that everybody achieves the same outcome, that's where things change, and we don't want to see that.
And to piggyback off of Bob said too about lowering education standards, we have already eliminated valedictorian status in the name of educational equity now. Schools use the term equity and they take a word and make it seem right, but it's basically an inferior word. It's in an attempt to promote unity. We're creating racism where it does not even exist. I think it's important that we recognize that the argument is truly equality of outcome versus equality of opportunity, and why should we promote someone to work hard when the outcome is already determined? And what we should be doing is demanding our students be the best versions of themselves.
Thank you. There's a question about the Anderson High School pool and the use of the turbine pool. And so the question has to do with how would you solve the problem of Anderson Township, Anderson High School's pool. But perhaps there are some people here like me whose kids graduated long before this problem became apparent or realized. So if you don't mind just describing what the problem is very briefly, and then if you would share with us if you have a solution or if you have ideas about approach, if you would share that with the audience.
The pool has been empty for about a little over 2 years now.
This is at Anderson.
And Anderson, I'm sorry, yes. So it was leaking thousands, I think 3,000 gallons a day is what they said at one point of water. And so it's shut down, it's drained, nobody can use it, so all the kids go to turbines. So that was 2 years ago. So for whatever reason, the committee was just now formed to investigate different options. I don't know why it took 2 years for the board to figure out how to make this a priority, but for whatever reason they did. I think with as little pressure as possible on the taxpayers, you could do something like what West Claremont did, and partner with a private entity, and come up with like a community type pool. Something that everybody can use, because I think they're projecting over $2 million to fix the pool at Anderson. And that's a lot of money, especially when you just spent $103 million remodeling all the school districts. So there has to be some sort of community, public-private partnership to get it off the ground, I think.
I mean, again, I agree with Bob, and to add on to that, I mean, we can't pretend to have all the answers because we're not privy to all of the insider information. So, definitely the next school board needs to take action to make some type of decision about the pools and in the most cost-effective way. Okay.
So the Forest Hill School District has implemented various measures to address student wellness, yet there has been a suggestion that some of these measures taken are not sufficient. So what is your response to that?
I want to start with, all right. I'd like to start with this one. I've done a little research, so I'd like to read that as well. I'd actually like to see the fact-based evidence that shows that we're not meeting our mental health standards. I think the district has gone above and beyond with mental health programs. I reject the premise that the district is not meeting those mental health goals or the mental health programs for the needs of the students. Now there was a social and emotional learning, SEL and equity survey emailed out to parents on 9/28. The survey is from the Panorama, and I would encourage every parent to research further into what that organization actually is. And once you find that out, you probably want to opt out of that survey. These mental wellness surveys are anxiety causing for our students, and they flag students based on their answers. These surveys are not for parents' review, they're only for district staff and a wellness committee. And this Wellness Committee, and again, this is coming from actual Forest Hills documents, and it's in the teaching and learning on the website. And it states that the Wellness Committee will work with consultants of the Panorama third party to understand how to read and analyze various reports from the students. And the Panorama offers an online professional library of evidence-based interventions. And it says that Forest Hills will work with these Panorama consultants to align their current tiered supports, which are aligned with CASEL standards. CASEL is CASEL. And what is CASEL? CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. The CEO, again, I got into a rabbit hole one night just looking at this stuff, and the CEO announced to the company in December of 2020, and I quote, that they have revised its definition of framework for socio-emotional learning to highlight that value of SEL as a weapon for social justice. I would invite anybody to convince me that any of these programs are good for the mental health of our students, because for me, this has no place in the district.
Just one thing to say about the Panorama, I sent some questions back to the district when they distributed the survey. I'm still kind of going back and forth with her on her getting the answers to me and so forth. But one of the answers is I asked the questions I asked her, where is all the data being stored for these answers? It's a digital online survey. It's not a piece of paper where the kids fill it out. And she came back and said that Panorama is actually hosting and storing on their servers, and having your child's answers stored somewhere else than Forest Hills School District, I'm not a fan of. So again, security, they can tell me that they can have all the security, they think they have, but with hacking everything that we hear about these days, I doubt it.
Bob, did you want to speak to that?
One
No,
point on
no,
that.
we're not having audience
Those
questions.
surveys began today.
Excuse me, I'll stop this thing right now. I will, okay? You understand me? We are not having an interactive program here. These are the questions that we're asking. We solicited some community questions and we're gonna ask them. And we're gonna ask those of the panel and they're gonna answer them. After that, as I said, there will be an opportunity for you to come up and talk to these people and address any questions you have. Do you understand me? Sir?
I do.
Thank you. Her, thank you. All right, so the next question is, what is the role of school administration and staff to address serious personal challenges a particular child may face, such as perhaps suicidality or sexual preference?
Repeat that again.
Sure. What is the role of school administration and staff, in your view, to address serious personal challenges a particular child may face, such as suicidality or perhaps a sexual preference?
I guess teachers know the students the best, that they're around them sometimes more than their own parents are. If a teacher sees something that's out of the ordinary for that child, they can simply talk to that child, and if it needs to go further, maybe bring in their parents. Changing whole programs for one student, it doesn't seem very productive in my opinion. But that's about that's pretty much all I have to say about that.
I would add to that, teachers and staff are obviously able to identify any student needs, or if a student is in distress, and I would hope that they would then communicate that with the parents, and based on all of the resources that Forest Hills has to offer their students, I'm sure they can find some outlet to help students.
Yeah, I agree. We have excellent teachers and they know their students best, and if a student's having problems, they probably know it and they know exactly where to go. We have the counselors, we have psychologists, we have just excellent programs that we can offer out to any child that's struggling with anything. And if we don't, I know that we would go out and get it. We would go find it for them. And again, we'd also have to loop in the parents as well. They're a part of the equation, and we would need to get them involved.
Okay, all right. So the next question is, what, in your view, is the role of the school board in the administration of the schools? In other words, what is the role of the school board, if any, with regard to staff and teachers and that sort of interaction in that way?
Sure. The role of the board is to provide oversight on policies and statutory requirements, right, pertaining to public education, implementing policies, and meeting the desires of the citizens as well. So, while they have two-way communication with staff, of course, they would. It would ultimately be the responsibility of the superintendent to be the hierarchy of the organization that goes down.
Just basically what Linda said, the school board itself doesn't manage the day-to-day operations of the district. That's the superintendent's responsibility. That's why it's important to have a strong superintendent in the district.
Sarah? I don't really have anything else.
Okay. We have one last question that we'll end with, which in a few minutes, that was part of the September 29th forum. But now I'd like to insert questions that were solicited prior as we had requested. If anyone had a question, we solicited to send it to us prior. We had 6 questions that were sent, 3 of which actually were already incorporated into the program. The first had to do with how the school board president becomes the school board president, whether by election or appointment, and we've answered that. I believe the candidates indicated that the board elects its president. And then the next question that was covered was why seek a political endorsement, and that was covered. And then the last, why a separate candidate night, and we've covered that. So, but I do appreciate those people who offered those questions, because it underscores the importance of our having addressed them, and also underscores why they were included, at least 2 of them were included on the September 29th programming. They're obviously important to the public. Another question that was sent to us was, there is the Forest Hills website, and on the website there are in fact a couple of tabs, one for CRT informationally, and then another that's titled intimidation. So the question that was presented to the candidates was, do you intend to add material to the intimidation tab? And I would turn that over to the candidates.
I would hope we would not have to add any more political intimidation information to that tab. But keep in mind, all of that is records requests that we have received. That is absolutely no opinion of anything that we have. Strictly fact-based evidence that we're sharing with the public. Anyone else?
As far as like she said, the intimidation, hopefully we don't want to add anything else. We're not, it's all fact-based information. There's no way around that. And what was the other part of the question?
That was it.
Oh, that was, okay, yeah.
All right, and then the last of the questions that were submitted was a 2 actually, but from the same questioner. They're somewhat substantive, so if you'll bear with me. The question was, because the questioner noted the declining enrollment in the district from 2010 to 2020, and also noted the 2 operating levies that we've all voted on in the last few years, in 2012 and 2019. And the question is, if elected, will you provide information in a transparent manner so that taxpayers can understand why, if this is the case, that there would be a projected deficit in the cash flow of the district of revenues of $4.7 million, where expenses of $6.4 million. So if there is going to be a projected deficit in the finances of the district, will you be transparent in making sure the community understands that dynamic, understands its causation, and understands what the financial situation is? And then also, in light of declining enrollment related understands from a transparent data point why there would be a need to grow personnel service and employee benefits by 17%. So in a nutshell, this questioner wants to know if indeed we need another levy, if indeed we need to increase benefits to our employees, will you be transparent so the community has insight into the need for that?
Yes.
Is that a consensus, I guess?
Of course, yes.
And then the same questioner, based on those same data points, asks, will you resist a levy in 2022 unless taxpayers are afforded that transparency and explanation, and so they can understand the necessity of such a levy?
Yes.
Of course.
Okay.
Linda? All right.
And then the last question that was, or topic or concept that was posed at the September 29th forum, we would ask, of the candidates currently running for the board, which do you think would best serve the interests of parents and children in the district, and why do you think so?
I'll go, and I would say all of the 4 for 4. We all 4 have worked really hard together as a group, but yet we all bring different skill sets to the table. Linda would be policy with a purpose because she's a policy expert. Bob would be our resource watchdog since Bob has been going to the school board meetings for 4 years now. He's my go-to for questions if I ever have it. So he seems to be an expert in what's happened in the past and with records requests. Katie Stewart, committed to curriculum. Katie with 6 kids, she knows what's going on with curriculum. And myself being a tax auditor, I would be mindful of our money. I would definitely look forward to taking a deep dive into the spending history and the 5-year forecast and trying to make any improvements that we can.
So, let me close with somewhat of an apology for just sort of taking control in an aggressive way. Frankly, I'm kind of known for that. But this is obviously a very important election, and people have important, strong feelings about it. And this was a panel presentation designed to present people's views. And so it would have the ability to become, I don't know, a 911 call maybe. So they're seeking to avoid it. No, I'm teasing, obviously. But I do realize the tensions, there are tensions. There are people who feel strongly, and these are our children. And these are our homes, and this is our tax base. So we just wanted to limit it to their presentation. But I do invite you sincerely to address them with any questions you might have. Thank you very much for